All right, our number looks pretty stable right now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First off, I want to welcome all of our alumni, parents, students, and any faculty and staff members that we have joining us. My name is Jennifer Thomas, and I'm the interim athletic director for this year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to give a short PowerPoint presentation just to go over some things, how this year has gone and such. And then we will go ahead and do Q&A. As I mentioned, as people were logging in, as the presentation goes on, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. There should be a link down at the bottom of your screen for you to go ahead and put those questions in. And then we will work on addressing all of your questions that you might have, either through our time together tonight, or if we run out of time, we will be following up with you on an individual basis. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to do is give some introductions. So as I indicated, my name is Jennifer Thomas, and I'm the Interim Director of Athletics and Recreation. I am a proud PLU alum from 1998 and 1999, getting my degrees in physical education and education. Now, as I introduce my colleagues, the coaches that are joining us, you can see their information on the screen. I would also like them to share a favorite PLU memory. So that could be from their time as a student for those that are alums or as a coach. First off, I want to introduce, as he was mentioned earlier, the man, the myth, and the legend, Kevin Aoki, who is our head women's volleyball coach in his 25th year as a coach at PLU. And he is a PLU alum from 1984 in secondary education. We have Adam Fry, the head men's and women's cross country and track and field coach, who, although he didn't go to PLU, he did attend a sister institution in Luther and majored in physical education. And finally, last but not least, John York, our head men's soccer coach, who is also a PLU alum getting degrees in business administration and secondary education. So if I could have you all go ahead and share one of your favorite memories at PLU, and then we will roll into the rest of the presentation.
All right, I'll go first. I'm only a legend because I'm old. 40 years ago, I was a freshman on PLU's campus, living in Flieger Hall. And the one memory I have was I was imitating Michael Jackson and doing my moonwalk at Songfest.
Wow.
Can we see that moonwalk again, Kevin?
Maybe. I may have to bust it out again.
We got to talk about that. Yeah, Adam Fry, excited to be here. 5th year as the head men's and women's cross country coach. I would say a favorite memory for me is right out at the PLU track where I am at the moment. We hosted the Northwest Conference Championships spring of 2019, and the first event on the track, day one of the meet, we went 1, 2, 3 in the men's steeplechase, swept it, which was my favorite event in college. I was a steeplechaser. And so to start the meet by sweeping that, getting all 3 guys on the podium was pretty special. So.
John York, this is my 18th year here as men's soccer coach. And yes, Kevin's more of the man and the legend. I'm kind of the myth, you know. But you can see we got a beautiful sunset out here at the field. And I guess my favorite memory I'd say is a couple of years ago, we were able as a program to hit a milestone event in our program. And it was really cool because we had alums there from the 80s and 90s. We had current students. We had people who had played through the program over the last 10 to 15 years. And it was just a big conglomeration of Lute alums and current students. And we were able to all celebrate this milestone together. And it was just a really cool night. So that I'd say that was one of my favorite highlights.
All right, thank you. Okay, so as we get started, I want to share a little bit about myself, being that I'm new in this role. I do know some of you that are joining us, but others I don't know as well. So I want to share a little bit about myself as we get going. First off, I think one of the keys to my leadership philosophy that I think is worth mentioning is that my leadership is really based in the care for and the experience of our student athletes. And really everything that I try to do, I'm trying to improve our student athlete experience. And I think that that's the most critical thing that we can do. And that one of the things that PLU is known for is really providing that quality educational and athletic experience to our students and our student athletes. So that is, I mean, obviously I have some other things within my leadership philosophies, but for me, that is really at the core at why I do what I do and how I'm making the decisions. One of the keys that I want to continue to build on is to continue to build the culture of comprehensive success. So this is not just the athletic excellence, but also within academic excellence and leadership and service. You know, even though last year was a shortened year, we still were very excited to have two Northwest Conference champions in men's and women's soccer. Unfortunately, our spring teams were not able to complete their year, so we will never know how they did. But we had 26 student athletes who earned first team All Northwest Conference honors. 10 of those student athletes received major awards from the Northwest Conference, including Freshman of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and we had 7 student athletes who earned first team All Region honors. Academic excellence is also something that's very important within our department. And excitedly, last spring, we had 19 out of 19 teams earn a cumulative and a term GPA of 3.0 or higher. 80% of our student athletes earned a GPA above a 3.0. And that number is really exceptional when you consider how much our student athletes are trying to balance in the role of being a student athlete. And finally, leadership and service is an important way to round everything out. I'm very proud that we have a comprehensive leadership program that we have developed within the athletic department to help really foster the leadership and growth of our student athletes. This begins in the first year for all of our first year student athletes as they take what we call a plus 100 class, and that's a transitions to PLU class. All of our first year athletes participate in this class, and we're lucky enough to have our coaches co-teach that with a campus partner. And John and Kevin both are teaching one of those sections this year. And really, all of our coaches rave about the experience, and the student athletes are enjoying it as well as they get to know what it means to be a Lute. For the role of athletics at PLU, here are some thoughts that I put together. Integrate with the educational experience by providing the student athletes the opportunity to succeed at the highest level of academics and within NCAA Division III competition. Really want to keep working on developing student athletes that are committed to collaboration and leadership during their careers at PLU, and hopefully that will translate into success after graduation. Within the leadership program that I referenced, we have been fortunate enough, not last spring, but for the last 3 springs prior to that, to have a student athlete networking event. And that was a great opportunity for our student athletes to connect with alumni and to be able to have that really see how their athletic experience can translate into success after graduation. Another key principle is developing a more engaged campus experience for the entire PLU community and really inspire a lifelong commitment to PLU. You know, just as Kevin said, one of his fondest memories is him doing the moonwalk at Songfest. Many other students have memories of attending football games or basketball games, soccer matches, volleyball, track and field meets. Athletics is something that is not just limited to the student athletes that participate, And I think that if you asked many students at PLU, they would have fond memories of some form of PLU athletics. And finally, really want athletics to continue to connect PLU alumni and extend the community by building spirit and enthusiasm and pride in athletic success. Very excited to host opportunities like this, where we can continue to engage alumni, as well as build relationships with parents and families, as well as faculty and staff members. So now when we think about this year and this being my first year in the role of an interim AD, I tried to think of what a good visual representation of what leadership for this year has been. And I started this position on July 1st. So to me, being a child of the 80s, Pac-Man seems like a very fitting representation. Now, when I began planning to take over this role in April, dealing with COVID, it seemed like this was a manageable maze with the ghosts, having to get all of the points, as you all remember playing Pac-Man, and really having a lot of things that you have to deal with all at the same time. Not only do you have to get all those little dots, but you have to try to avoid the ghosts as well. Then if we think about planning for the athletics, what it was going to mean for this fall, the maze really doubled in size. Not only did that double in size, the number of dots that you have to consume, that has doubled as well. It's just not been a simple process, and nonetheless, it's not something that is too daunting to try to overcome. Reflections for the first 100 days. To me, this has been trying to create a game plan without being able to use any scouting film. There are timeouts that we have called through this fall so far, and those timeouts have given us the opportunity to take a pause and try to figure out what decisions need to be made, making sure that we're ensuring the health and safety and the well-being of our student athletes being at the first and the foremost of every decision that we make. We've had to make some player substitutions, and through that, I've found some new MVPs within the department. Most notably, I think some of the biggest MVPs we have on our team right now are our athletic trainers. This is often an unsung role. These are the people that are taping the ankles, that are providing rehabilitation for our injured athletes. And this year they've really had to step it up and increase some protocols, develop some systems on the fly, and really have to learn more so how to pivot on a dime. During this time in the fall, we've also had to adjust our offense and defense. COVID has really been throwing us some challenges throughout the year. And we have to just keep figuring out how we're going to make those adjustments in order to be successful. And hopefully, I'm hoping that we near halftime really soon. You know, we just don't know. If you would have asked me in March where we would be come October, I would have thought that we would have a football game this weekend, as well as soccer games and volleyball matches, but we're just not there yet. So for me, it's hard to tell if we're at that halfway point and are really at the point that we can begin planning for those competitions, or if we're going to have to continue to make adjustments within the seasons. Continuing with the reflections for the first 100 days, I want to acknowledge some of the challenges that we have had. All of our competitions have been canceled, or not canceled, they've been postponed for fall semester. We will not have any competitions until after January 1. And that is similar for all of the teams within the Northwest Conference. So all those schools that we compete against, there is nobody that is having competitions this fall. I think for our student athletes, having the blended or virtual classes has also been a challenge. One of the great things about being at PLU is that small class size. And so our student athletes are still learning how to navigate a different system within the academics, And luckily enough, last spring, our student athletes performed very well in their classes, but having virtual classes is still not the same. So I'm very excited that a lot of the classes are moving to also meet in person this semester. And I know that we're hearing very positive feedback from the Plus 100 class that our coaches are teaching, and that the students are really appreciating that in-person opportunity that they have to attend class. I think another challenge for us for the remainder of the year is the future around COVID testing. You may or may not have heard that the NCAA is recommending for the sport of basketball that we have COVID testing up to 3 times a week for our student athletes during their competition season. And for us and for every other small college, it is a challenge to try to figure out what that means. We've been fortunate enough at PLU to be able to partner with Pierce County's Department of Health to provide COVID testing for all of our students upon returning to campus this fall. And we're also conducting surveillance testing for 25% of our athletic teams every 2 weeks. So we're rotating that COVID testing around so that eventually all of our student athletes will have additional surveillance testing. But we feel that that has been an important aspect of this fall experience. The future testing and what the NCAA puts forward in the future, we're just not sure yet. So that's one of the challenges that we're trying to plan for. Within the Northwest Conference, we're also having to adapt to different recovery phasing because we're competing in 2 different states and multiple counties, sometimes trying to plan the future competition schedule for this year. It's a little bit unknown in trying to figure out what we are going to be able to do or what are some of the adjustments that need to be made. And finally, the NCAA recommendations and the mandates that came down this summer seem to be geared towards high resource Division I institutions. And so that has been a challenge to navigate some of the late recommendations that the NCAA has made and some of the requirements around the provisions to ensure the health and safety of student athletes. A lot of those are geared towards very high resourced institutions like the University of Washington or Washington State, where they have medical systems on campus that can handle a high volume of COVID testing for all of their student athletes. This fall has also brought opportunities. In the spring semester, we will have the unique opportunity where we will be having all 19 teams competing within the same 4-month period. This is going to be very unique and something that I know that our student athletes are excited about. When I meet with them, when I talk with them, they're really excited about that opportunity to really feel like it's one big family all competing within the same season. And so we're really excited to be able to attempt that. Acknowledge to all of our coaches and to our support staff that it will be a new animal to try to tackle in having so many different competitions within a short period of time. But I'm really excited about the opportunities that will bring as well. One of the other opportunities we have is I will be working on completing an NCAA self-study this year, which is an opportunity to reflect on different policies and procedures, offerings that we have within the athletic department, as well as a way to evaluate if there's any adjustments or changes that need to be made. So I think that that's a great opportunity for us to build on. Our coaches are very engaged on campus and with their teams. Being able to pause and do things differently this spring, I think opened up new opportunities for our coaches to be able to continue to meet and build relationships with their student athletes throughout the spring and the summer. Our coaches are also very engaged on campus, serving in different committees, as well as just continuing to build those relationships with other areas on campus. The eagerness, gratitude, and joy that our coaches have, but more importantly, our student athletes have with the opportunity to practice is something that is unique to this year. I think that previously, before last spring when spring sports had to take a pause. That sometimes student athletes, maybe even coaches, take for granted the opportunity to get on the course, to be able to get on the field together and have those opportunities of practice. And I know as I've traveled around to many different teams as practices this fall, the student athletes are really practicing, they're participating with a renewed sense of gratitude and joy, because athletics was something that was taken away for them for a period of time. And for me, that's really important to see that our student athletes are really on the field of practice, they're engaging with their teammates, and they're having a great time doing it. And then I also think that an opportunity for us comes with our department theme for this year, and that together we will. I really think that if we work together, all of our teams will be able to succeed this year, this spring, returning to the field of competition. And as I talk with our student athletes again about this theme, they're very excited about that and the opportunity to continue to support one another. And that is something that I think is very unique to the PLU athletic department, is the inter-team support that our student athletes show for each other. They'll often, the men's soccer players are going to show up and go to a softball game. The baseball players are going to come to the volleyball games. Cross country, track and field, they host limited home meets, but our student athletes are always out there helping with those meets, or cheering the athletes on. So really 2020 for me is really that rallying cry that together we will be able to overcome this situation and make the best of it. Some of the successes that I've seen within the department this fall: a return to practice. There is nothing better than seeing our teams being able to return to the practice field. We were lucky enough for that to begin to take place late August, with the return of our fall teams to the practice field. COVID testing on campus, that has been a success. As I mentioned, partnering with Pierce County's Department of Health, we have hosted multiple community testing dates on PLU's campus. And through the over 2,000 tests that have been administered, we've had very few, including, I think the number was about 3 positive tests, and the university has been able to manage that and care for those students in a way that they've been able to successfully recover and return to classes. Leadership development opportunities. We have had the opportunity to reimagine some of the leadership development methods that we had. We had previously done in-person leadership development workshops, and now we've been able to take that to a virtual format, which has expanded the opportunity for more student athletes to be able to participate. Plus 100 and a reimagined Lute's Lead program are 2 examples of that. And we have also begun to build a staff leadership library where coaches and staff members are sharing recommendations of leadership books that they have read, and then they can borrow. So I know that many coaches are starting to take the advantage of that and learn from some of the recommendations that their peers are providing. And finally, one of the successes that we have that has been beginning is that I have been participating in weekly meetings with the Washington State Governor's Office for return to competition planning. And that includes athletic directors from all of the 4-year colleges across the state, with the exception of the University of Washington and Washington State. But all the other 4-year institutions, including Gonzaga, Eastern, Central Washington, University of Puget Sound, and Evergreen State, we all meet on a weekly basis to work with the governor's office to plan for the return to competition. And for me, that's an exciting moment to be able to have the governor's office acknowledge that collegiate sport is different than the youth sport policies that are out, and to recognize that there's a need to have the planning in our arena. So just two closing thoughts. For me, it's the people that really make PLU athletics and recreation extraordinary. And of course, in the words of Hall of Fame tennis coach Mike Benson, it's a great day to be a Lute. So now we're going to go ahead and turn it over to the question and answer portion of our program. So I'm going to stop sharing that and we will start doing the questions. Bear with me one moment while I change screens. Okay, one of the first questions that was submitted was about whether or not there's going to be a men's and women's team and swim meets this winter. Yes, our plan is that we will have competitions for all of our sports in the spring semester. We don't have competition schedules finalized at this point because some of the conference institutions are making some adjustments right now, but we should have draft schedules available to share with our coaches, hopefully by the end of October. And we anticipate that we will be able to have team competitions for all 19 of our teams at different points throughout the early spring all the way through April. With swim in particular, this is an exciting year in that PLU and the University of Puget Sound are partnering with the Seattle Sports Commission to host the Division III National Championships in March. And from the conversations that we've been having with the King County Aquatic Center and with the NCAA, those are still on track to occur as they have been scheduled. So we're very excited about that. All right, so the first question, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to all of our coaches. What distinguishes being a Lute today from the other schools in the Northwest Conference? John, what do you think?
I was just going to say, one of the things I'll tell you, I not really, it's been fairly recently. I ran into someone who does a lot of hiring, and I thought it was very interesting, the conversation. We talked, and he found out I was at PLU, and the guy said to me, he said, whenever I see PLU on a resume, I pay attention. And I thought that was an interesting, very interesting and very flattering statement about our university. And I think, as I look around the Northwest Conference and I look at the other schools, I see things that they do well and things that they don't do well. And as we study ours, I feel like one of the things that we do that differentiates ourselves is that we do a lot of things well. And I think part of that reason is because I think there's a true commitment by not only our athletic department, but also our professors, our leadership in the university, to making the experience the best we possibly can for our students. And I know people say that, and you go to any university, they're going to say that, but I think we actually live that here. And I think you see that in the way some of our professors have cared for some of our, our athletes or even our students. You see it in how our leadership have been actively involved, not only in really trying to make the experience for this university a great one in the midst of a crisis, but also the one-on-one personal contact that they have with our athletes. Our president is calling athletes, is reaching out individually to athletes at times. I just think there's a real personal touch here that carries over into a lot of things we do that, I can't speak necessarily for all the other schools, but I would say that I think that we probably are very different in that way.
Adam or Kevin, do you have anything to add?
I would say being here a long time, and when people ask me that, I would say it comes down to relationships. Everybody wants to win championships. We get that. But it has to start with relationships that you build within your team, and from your team to your coaches to the athletic department, and then across campus. I think that's one of the reasons why I've stayed here connected. I could have gone back to Hawaii 36 years ago, but I've stayed in the PLU community just for that reason. I think the connection that we have built with alumni and just the people on campus has set us apart.
Adam?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Kevin and John said. And maybe one thing I'd add is I feel like there's just kind of a blue collar work ethic here at PLU where, especially when I came in 4 years ago, facilities, like maybe we didn't have the nicest facilities in the conference, or like, we had some equipment that needed upgrading, but we just brought this attitude of, hey, we're gonna work and, make the best of what we have. And it's great to see. I know like the men's locker room that we share with football, cross country, track and field. Huge thing for us, and it's definitely going to help in recruiting. But it's about that blue collar work ethic of just we're going to get the job done and out compete anybody. And I feel like I see that in other teams here at PLU as well. And maybe I'll kind of share this. I saw there was a question from a former Lute athlete and Luther College Norse coach, which is awesome. Go Lutes, go Norse. And something that kind of applies to both these questions. Question was a lesson that I've learned or ideas as a Norse athlete that I brought to PLU athletics, and actually coached at Luther College for 3 years as well, following grad school. And I joke that I found the closest thing to Luther College out here in the Northwest after moving out, and was very fortunate to get a position here at PLU. But like Kevin said, it's all about relationships, and that's I was going to say. My college coaches taught me it's all about how you treat people. And I was fortunate to go back and also coach with Jeff Weddick and Stephen Yaropashi, learned a ton from them, as well as Paul Schmedicke at Hamlin University. And it's about how you treat people. And a quote from Jeff Weddick, the track and field coach at Luther, that really stuck with me is he said, be the most positive person you know. And that's something that I try to do. And I feel like I see a lot in our department here at PLU.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that grit and that grind that Adam alluded to is something that really does set PLU apart from other institutions. And I think that's why our student athletes are so great at supporting one another, is that they recognize the work ethic that the other teams and that their peers are putting in to try to be the best that they can be, and really improve upon where they're at as individuals. Two other questions that relate to some of the things that I touched on that I'm going to go ahead and answer before we get to more sport type questions is, what is surveillance testing? And then there's a question related to explaining the 25% within the surveillance testing that I spoke about. So surveillance testing is the testing that we are continuing to do for PLU students and PLU student athletes throughout the fall semester. We're not performing these tests because our students or our student athletes are symptomatic, but we are doing it to try to make sure that they are not asymptomatic and carriers of COVID. So we are doing the testing for 25% of our student athletes on each team. So on the cross country team, 25% of the team was tested this last week. 25% of volleyball was tested, 25% of men's soccer. So we tested 25% of each of our 19 teams, and that will continue throughout the fall semester. So every 2 weeks, we will have another surveillance test, and a different 25% of the teams will be tested. So within a 4 testing cycle, we will know that 100% of our student athletes have been tested throughout the semester to try to ensure that we're getting a good random mix of students that are selected for testing. The institutional research is setting up so that the students are randomized who are selected. So it's not like we're just testing all the seniors within one testing cycle. There really is a mix of on-campus students and some of our commuter students, students who live in a variety of different residence halls, and then having the different teams being tested. And I think that's helping to reassure our student athletes that the environment that we're trying to create for them is as safe as possible. Some of our peer institutions within the Northwest Conference are not doing this because of resources. And so that's something that I think helps to set us apart and really illustrate the care for our student athletes that we're taking.
And maybe If I could just, I think I heard on the radio this morning, it was about nationally only like 25% of schools are doing surveillance testing, which kind of surprised me and made me feel good about what we're doing here at PLU.
Yeah, I really do think that it's making a difference within our students' experience to know that the whole PLU population has the opportunity to get tested every 2 weeks. And that has only been made available through the partnership with Pierce County Department of Health. And so we're very thankful for that because it is a unique partnership that we have. John, do you want to talk a little bit about this, if the soccer program is planning to play a full or abbreviated season?
Well, we haven't seen our schedule yet, and the word coming out is that we will play an abbreviated conference schedule, and then there will be an option. And Jen, you can correct me at any time that I'm speaking wrong. There will be an option if we want to play a full season that we can. I think what we have to determine is the NCAA's right now got the boundaries set that if we play 50% of our allowable games, then we don't use any eligibility. And if you put that together with the announcement that came earlier from our president that we're going to offer a free year of school to anyone who gets through gets through 4 years, you can have an extra year of school and an extra year of eligibility. There's a very realistic opportunity for us to have a shortened conference season and a decision on what we would do in the big picture with the 20 games. So.
Yep. Right now, our fall teams, the plan within the conference is to have an abbreviated season that would maintain their eligibility because there are no fall NCAA championships, no fall sport NCAA championships. The NCAA is still fully planning on having winter and spring championships at this point. And so the conference is still planning on having those teams be able, or those sports be able to have more complete seasons. And John is correct in indicating that with the abbreviated season, we will be doing that with the intention of maintaining the eligibility for the students so they can utilize the plus year that PLU put in place. Now, a question for all of our coaches is if you could please talk about the emotional, mental state of the student athletes. What are some of the resources being provided to them? And can you talk a little bit about their practice experience thus far this fall?
Happy to go first. Oh, go ahead, Adam. You go.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I think the biggest challenge is just the uncertainty. And that goes back to March when we kind of were suspended and then canceled. And then it's just, it's hard. That uncertainty is really tough. Like even when we had a decision this summer that we weren't going to compete this fall, then at least we kind of knew, like we kind of felt like that was maybe going to happen at some point. Are we going to compete? Are we not? And so I think the uncertainty is really tough. But as we've talked about as a coaching staff, just the opportunity to be able to come out to practice and be together with teammates, I think is the best thing that our student athletes probably have right now to deal with that. And I know certainly when our athletes were able to come back to campus and practice, even though we weren't competing this fall, I think they're just super grateful to have that opportunity.
I'd like to add to that. I think our girls, young ladies have been apart for so long. We didn't have spring practice and everything's on Zoom, and they finally get to be on campus and see their teammates. And so just the joy of being together and being able to practice, even though we have to practice with our mask on, we have to separate the girls in groups, 2 pods of 9, and just being able to be enjoying somewhat of a normal situation, even though we can't combine all 18 girls. Just being grateful for that opportunity to be together, because some of the kids are still doing virtual learning. So basically their practices is the one constant that they can maintain and see their friends, teammates.
Yeah, I would echo.
I think oh, go
I
ahead,
was just
John.
gonna say I'd echo what the other coaches said, and I'd even take it a step further and talk about just our plus 100 that we're doing with our first year student athletes, and actually a lot of those classes being in person, and just the feedback that the athletes are giving about being in person in a classroom, being able to get out and have a sense of normalcy on a field, just the mental boost that gives them, and just the excitement they have about being around their sport, and as Kevin said, their team, and being in a classroom where we're far from normal in anything that we're doing right now, but it is a sense of normalcy that I think has really been a positive thing.
And I think that that sense of normalcy and the opportunity to practice is something that is very critical to our student athlete experience. And we're fortunate enough to be able to offer that opportunity to our student athletes through the policies and the precautions that we have put in place. And that's not the case at every single Northwest Conference institution. Even across town at University of Puget Sound, all of their classes are remote for this semester, and their student athletes have only just been permitted to move back to campus to begin starting practice. And another institution within our conference, they don't have that opportunity. Their university is held firm in not allowing any athletic practices to occur. So we are very fortunate to have in place some of the procedures that we have that have allowed us to bring our teams back. Next question that I saw is a financial related question. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one. With the limited competition or some of the reductions within competitions, is there still a strong need for Lute Club donations for 2021? Or is it a greater need to direct it to other areas to PLU this year? Even though we will have in some of our sports reduced competition for this year, there is still a need within athletics to do fundraising for our teams. With some of the precautions that we have already outlined for teams in regards to traveling, there will be increased costs in a number of different areas. Potentially having to take multiple buses to get a team down to play in Oregon school, or needing to reduce the hotel room capacity to 2 students per room instead of some of the teams have had 4 per room. Those are all increases that we didn't anticipate when we were building budgets. We didn't know what the schedule was going to look like. Again, in March, we thought that everything was going to be returning to normal. So some of those changes within how our teams are operating and how they're going to travel, it will still create a need that not all of our teams will have the funding within their university budgets to accommodate for. And we are truly working as hard as we can for our winter teams and our spring teams to have as full of a competition schedule as they can. Our spring seasons were cut very short last year. And our student athletes in those sports and participating on those teams are quite concerned that that might happen again this year. So we're really trying to maintain that they're going to have as full of a competition schedule as possible. And really having the support from our donors is as critical as ever. Not to say that there aren't other areas of need within the university. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Bugue Day is coming up in a couple of weeks here, and any donation that you give to the Lute Club Fund or to any of our athletic teams will be matched with money going to academic scholarships. So that's a great opportunity to have your dollars double and impact multiple areas of the institution.
Jen, can I add something to that?
Please do.
So for 24 years, we ran the PLU volleyball camp during the summer, which brought in probably 160 young ladies in 2 weeks' time. And because of the COVID situation, we were not able to run the camp. And that's a major fundraiser for our volleyball team for the last 24 years. So all of a sudden, you take that amount and you take about 20% of our budget away. Now you're asking a lot from our student athletes to kind of fund some things that the camp normally paid for. So that's not only, we're not the only sport. All the other sports that ran camps are in the same situation.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Kevin. Okay, next question. With the 19 sports at the same time, and we know that one of the provisions of Division III, one of the great things is that we have many students who participate in multiple sports. Will the spring schedule allow for multi-sport athletes? Right now, the Northwest Conference is working on building drafts of the schedules, as I mentioned, and we're trying to space out sports so that multi-sport athletes would still have the opportunity to participate on different teams. So within the conversation that the athletic directors have been having within the conference, we will do the fall sports will roll out probably with competition at the very end of January or February, beginning of February. And our spring sport athletes will likely start the main portion of their competitions in March. We're hoping by staggering that a little bit that we will still ensure that there will be the opportunity for multi-sport athletes to be able to participate in both seasons of their sport. One of the great things about our coaches is understanding that students want to participate in multi-sports and that our coaches will be willing to work together to help provide those opportunities. We will also be having teams that will be competing on different days. So let's say volleyball is likely going to have a competition on a Friday and a Saturday. Other sports may have their competitions on a Sunday, or we might find some midweek competitions. So we will find that out soon. But again, our intention is to be able to maintain the opportunity for students to be able to participate in multiple sports. Okay, another question. I'm going to direct this to the coaches. Is our student athletes excited about the +1 year, or do we not anticipate that students are going to take that additional year? Coaches, anyone had conversations with your student athletes about that?
I have many students that have expressed an interest in doing so. I've talked to at least 7 or 8 of my players about their intent to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and we have several athletes that plan to as well. All of our track and field athletes have a season of eligibility from at least the outdoor season last year, and all of our cross country runners will get a waiver for this year, no matter what our schedule looks like in the winter. And some of them have already said they plan to come back and take advantage of that. So I feel like that was a huge thing for some of our student athletes who would want to come back for that extra season.
I think being a fall sport, it lends itself perfectly because they would not have to go the whole year. They would just have to finish that fall term up that extra year. So giving them that option, I think is helpful, but it also affects kind of how we recruit too, because now you kind of have an added class down the road someplace.
Yep, I agree. I think that it's a great opportunity for the students that need a little extra time to complete their degree or want to explore a little bit more within their academic realms and maybe add an additional minor or even a second major. And certainly myself and Jennifer Childress White, who's working on the compliance end of things, will be working directly with our student athletes who are interested in this, so that we can assist them in planning their academic calendar and ensuring that they're going to be able to do what they want to do.
Along that lines, I got a kind of funny story. During my time at PLU, I told my dad I'm going to switch majors from business to education. So I said, Dad, it might take me 5 years. Son, we're paying only for 4. So I could have used that plus year 30 something years ago. But needless to say, I got done in 4.
Yeah. Dad was right. Okay. Could we go over social distancing consequences for student athletes? Do I have a coach that wants to talk about that?
Sure, I can share kind of what I know off the top of my head, what I can recall. So as an athletic department, we did develop a PLU athletics social responsibility statement. So kind of some common, guidelines and consequences for all PLU athletes. So it wasn't all up to just individual coaches, and we had some continuity across the department. And basically, following PLU and Pierce County state guidelines, and there are some consequences for attending gatherings or hosting a gathering. And if a team has more than two kind of offenses for the policy themselves, then there's some additional, or like there's potential for kind of suspension across the team or consequences for the entire team. So I did get to suspend 3 of my women yesterday for a violation of attending a gathering. So hopefully a good learning opportunity for them. And it's hard because, college students want to be able to socialize and gather, and we understand that. And we're just working with them to try to make sure that they're doing it in the safest way possible that allows us to protect the health of our community and the ability to continue to practice and hopefully be able to compete in the new year.
Yeah, and that really is at the heart of why we developed this type of a policy. And we're not unlike many other athletic departments across the country. So we want the student athletes to realize that there are consequences for attending social gatherings, also known as parties. That is something that is part of a normal college experience, but this is not a normal year. And we've had to make adjustments with how our teams practice, and our student athletes need to make some adjustments in the choices that they tend to make sometimes as 18 to 22-year-olds. If they're attending a party, we don't know who they're being exposed to, who those people have been exposed to. So we're really trying to ensure the health and safety of all of our student athletes and the PLU community. So there are some ramifications in terms of withholding practice opportunities from our student athletes if they're attending or hosting parties. But really that's done with all of our student athletes in the PLU community in mind. Is there a Hall of Fame banquet or event as part of homecoming this year? So I can address this one. We made the decision when all of the homecoming 2020 events went to a virtual format to postpone the induction class for the Athletic Hall of Fame. So we had 5 individuals and 1 team that were going to be inducted this year. And I notified each of them. I talked with them on the phone, had some great conversations, and explained to them that it would not be doing their athletic accomplishments justice if we did a Hall of Fame induction in a virtual format such as this. So we decided to go ahead and postpone the event to 2021, to fall 2021. And they already have that date. It's Friday, October 1st, 2021. We hope to return to an in-person format and really be able to recognize the accomplishments of that induction class. So we're already looking forward to next fall's homecoming this year. There's a question in regards to some of the facility improvements that are planned for the near future, if any. And we don't have anyone from advancement on this right now, but I can say that the university is looking forward to having a capital campaign in what I would call the relative near future. And major components to that capital campaign would include an updated recreation center for those of you that are PLU alums. Our fitness center, some of the equipment has changed, but the structure of the fitness center has not changed very much from when you were a student. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to really gather together as a university and try to put the resources together so that we can build a shiny new recreation center that helps serve the needs of all of the PLU students. Not just the needs from working out, but also provide some health and wellness resources in the facility as well. So I think that's one of the great opportunities that we have in the future and would love to start getting support for because that's an important part of the student and a student athlete experience. Other things that have been talked about would also include potential for a football stadium on campus. I know that is something that has been talked about for many, many years. But it's still something that's on the table. You know, PLU has the land to be able to do that. And I think that there's great possibility in being able to drum up support to be able to make that happen. Other than that, most of the facilities and the improvements that we would be talking about on a short-term basis are not necessarily some of the major capital improvements that one would be thinking about. We were able to put in a new dirt infield for softball last year. Baseball is getting new batting cage nets this year. So there's little things that are taking place across multiple facilities, but we don't have anything major on the table for this year.
Jen, you might want to add, we resurfaced Olson Auditorium's wood floor. So we basically took off all the paint and all the varnish and repainted and redid all of the lines and new logos, etc. So that was a major project that got pushed through.
Yep, yeah, and the floor looks fantastic. I cannot wait to see our teams competing on it. Another question coming in is around if there's any specific documented parameters that will prohibit spring competitions. And there are not any specific documented parameters that would prohibit our spring competitions. We are constantly working with information that the NCAA is putting out and using that in conjunction with the state of Washington and Pierce County regulations to try to put forward and to plan for our teams to be able to compete. Through the conversations and the regular meetings that I have with the state of Washington and the governor's office, as well as the Seattle Sports Commission and the athletic directors from other Washington four-year institutions, we're working to come up with specific language and address competitions at the state level for college sports. And then once we have that, we're also going to be working with the state of Oregon, at least from our perspective, because that's where the rest of the Northwest Conference institutions are from, so that we can create more of a comprehensive plan between the two states for our teams to be able to return to competition. And it has been a challenge because each of our institutions are in different counties. So what PLU and UPS may be able to do is not necessarily what Lewis and Clark in Portland might be able to do, or what a school like George Fox, who's more rural, might be able to do. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to work with the governor's office and to have assistance from the Washington State Governor's Office to make those inroads with the Oregon State Governor's Office as well. For our coaches, how will the plus year affect recruiting and size of teams?
I would say that for me, it's going to be almost recruiting as normal. And I would say for a multitude of reasons. Number one is there's just so much unknown right now about just how we move forward, and family situations change. And, I mean, you just don't know what the next phase of this whole pandemic is going to be. And so, you do anticipate that there's a potential that someone would have to leave school for a variety of reasons. But also, we want to continue to build our program. I think where I would see the biggest change in terms of recruiting for us would be maybe, kind of the fringe players in the class that you would see as more development type players for the long term. Whereas you start to look at the size of your roster and what you can actually afford to keep on your roster, and you say, okay, maybe this person is going to be a long-term projected player in the program, and it's going to bring us to 40 players. We really can't afford to have 40 players. That's where maybe the difference would be. But I think for the most part, for me, it's going to be recruiting as normal.
Kevin or Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, for me, I think we're beginning to have a little bit of that conversation now, because as recruits start to come in, we have to make sure that all our positions are covered and not overly covered. So for example, if we got 3 setters now, I can't bring in 3 setters next year because we're going to have 6. So making sure all our positions are covered and having that conversation with our current players and making sure where they're at. And whatever they say, they might not be 100% sure, like John has said. So still got to recruit.
Yeah, we're a little different in cross country and track and field, but we're not limited to a certain number of people, at each position or anything like that. And I'd say we have capacity and want to grow our rosters a little bit for both cross country and track and field. So it's just, an opportunity to hopefully help our program grow. And we just want to continue to bring in, numbers, quality, and people who are a good fit.
I think one thing I'd add, just strictly from a competitive standpoint, in terms of creating the most competitive roster we can, we're going to see a little bit of a trickle down effect from the Division One schools at keeping their eligibility. We're already talking to players that are like, I just don't have a place to go because all the Division One schools say they're not recruiting. The Division Two schools that can provide scholarships saying they're not recruiting, and they want to play. They want to play their sport. And they want to get a great education. And more kids that we are talking to are seeing Division III as a viable option that maybe in the past would have been a little hesitant to look that direction.
Great, thanks. Okay, our final two questions are more in regards to scheduling. So the first one is in regards to how the different sports seasons are going to roll out over the 4 months and what role the athletic directors in the conference have in influencing Northwest Conference decision making. So I'm going to take the scheduling one first, because at this point, our winter sport NCAA championships have not been postponed. So for us, that is basketball and swimming. We do need to get those seasons in as soon as possible. So within the draft schedules that the Northwest Conference has put together, it has those teams starting to compete around mid-January. For swimming as well. And swimming would be their Northwest Conference Championship is typically around President's Day weekend in February. And the NCAA Championship for swimming is still scheduled for mid-March. For basketball, they're quite similar in that they need to have their Northwest Conference competition wrapped up by the end of February. So there will likely be some modifications to the schedule in regards to how many different competitions they have for conference games. Once those teams are taken care of, our fall teams, as I have mentioned, will likely start competitions at the end of January, beginning of February, and we'll have competitions for a number of weeks that would actually potentially take them into the very beginning of April. And then, as I mentioned, with the spring sports, they will predominantly start their competitions in March and continue that through the end of April and even potentially within the first week of May. So there's more to come on that, but certainly the athletic directors within the Northwest Conference are working diligently to try to craft those schedules and to create that quality experience for all of the Northwest Conference institutions. In regards to the Northwest Conference and the influence that the athletic directors have on making some of the decisions, PLU is in a great opportunity this year that President Alan Belton is the chair of the President's Committee within the Northwest Conference. So he has been extremely instrumental in helping us get to where we are within the Northwest Conference and helping to facilitate the decisions that are being made at that level. Honestly, we don't have a better advocate than one that we have in Alan in being able to keep in mind our student athlete experience, even from looking at the plus year when the NCAA made the decision to allow for that extra year of eligibility for our student athletes. That was the same time that Alan worked with other university staff to come up with that plus year. So he has been a great advocate for athletics and really continues to have our student athlete experience in mind when making decisions. He is also great to be able to work with the other presidents within the conference to help facilitate discussions and help guide 9 different opinions to come to reach on a solid decision as it relates to athletics. So I think that's been a huge advantage that PLU has this year. And certainly within the conference, we're meeting on a weekly basis to try to keep moving the conference forward and making decisions around the scheduling and any other issues that come up. I do want to thank you all for coming tonight. I am so glad to have many of you come back as alumni and participate in this. To our parents that are on the call, thank you for entrusting us with your sons and daughters and allowing us to provide them with the quality experience that PLU can provide. I also want to thank John, Kevin, and Adam for their time and their participation in the event, especially since John and Kevin snuck out of practices early to be able to join us on the call. Again, thank you to everyone, and go Lutes.